Tourism Committee. I'm Councilwoman Janice Hahn, and chair of this committee. I'm joined by Councilmember LaBonge, and I believe Councilmember Rosendahl is on the way. Okay. If there's no objection, I was going to take number 5 on consent.
Very good.
Okay.
So moved.
So moved. All right. Then let's start with item 1.
Under item 1, in response to motion Han Garcetti introduced in June 2006, the Harbor Department submits a draft port recovery plan, which is a plan to minimize the effects of a terrorist attack or other emergency or disaster situation at the port. And the plan also is to assist in the port's recovery and restoration of normal operations. The Harbor Department's Director of Homeland Security and the Chief of Port Police are here to present and discuss the port recovery plan.
Okay, good morning, gentlemen. I think one of my goals in introducing this motion a couple of years ago, I believe, was after the Public Policy Institute released a report that talked about one of the ways to reduce the appeal of the ports for a target, a potential terrorist target, was to make sure you had a good working recovery plan that you could get back up and running as soon as possible. Their report talked about if there was a major shutdown, a major attack at a port, that it could cost up to $45 billion loss to the U.S. economy, 200,000 jobs could be lost. And 2 years ago, that was daunting numbers to me. And I think even now, with the economy the way it is, the recession, that seems even more devastating. Kind of a loss to this country. So I wanted to see, did we have a good recovery plan? What would we do, God forbid, if something completely shut down the port, either a man-made attack or a natural disaster? I mean, we actually had a tsunami warning a few years back that there actually could be a tsunami that also devastated port operations. So one of the things I asked for was to do we have a recovery plan? And at the time, we did not. We did not. So you contracted out to a company to put together this recovery plan. I must say, and I'll let you talk a little bit, I must say I was extremely disappointed in what you guys turned in to me. This was no more a recovery plan than anything. It was sort of like a table of contents. There was not one real action plan in here. So talk to me this morning about where this recovery plan is, how confident you feel, about getting up and running, getting the port back into operations as quickly as possible if something were to shut it down, wipe it out, loss of life, ships overturned in the harbor, terminals blown up. I mean, how do you get back up and going as quickly as possible? Which
Good
one
morning,
of you
Madam
would
Chair. Ron Boyd.
Can I just add
dare to start?
With the
Yeah.
current challenge in Mumbai, which is a terrible tragedy, was any of that similar thinking for our port and the challenges that it faces? Thank you so much.
There are, Madam Chair and Councilmember LaBonge. Good morning.
Good morning.
Boyd, Port of Los Angeles. I have to tell you that we certainly agree, especially as this venture started a couple of years ago, that there were a number of areas that were not addressed. There was a vendor who was hired that Director Cummings has been working with in those 2 years.
General Dynamics.
General Dynamics, and George is going to be able to fill you in on some of the components of what they've been working on and what they've been gearing towards, especially in regards to port recovery. When you talk about the world events that have been occurring, especially over the past few weeks, some of the tragedies there, those are both areas where we don't just look at the recovery aspect, but we look at the prevention, the deterrence, and there are a number of standing plans that we're working on and that's a theater-wide project that includes members of federal, state, and local first response agencies. And a number of those plans, quite naturally, would be secure plans that we'd be happy to talk about in a private briefing. The public document that you have there, though, is a although it's marked a final draft, there's a lot of additional information, a lot of enhancements that are going to be made. It's designed to provide direction to staff, to stakeholders, to members within the supply chain. And with that, I think Director Cummings can give you maybe a better idea of what things are in store as we start to improve the components of the plan.
Okay.
And good morning.
Good morning.
I think that some of the specific detail, actionable, and directive type language that you're looking for would not be in our port recovery plan, and I can touch on that, but first I'd get to where it would be, and that would be in our emergency procedures plan, and which we're in the process of revising. The Emergency Preparedness Department just recently put out new guidelines to all departments for a January 31st deadline for updated emergency preparedness plans. So let me step back. In terms of port recovery, when we look around the port, we're the port authority, and we play a key role, and we play kind of a coordinating role. But all of the other pieces, the port recovery plan, our intended audience, and we're basing it on, in large part, the language of the motion, was to instruct the reader on how all these different pieces fit together. And although we are the port authority, we don't have operational directional control over a lot of the key players in the port overall as a giant business unit. We can't control the U.S. Coast Guard. Our tenants we have business arrangements with them, but we can't direct them to make business decisions and take business steps. We have to work with them, provide information. We have to facilitate the interactions between the federal agencies and the private entities. We have to reach back to the export ports and keep them informed, and the shipping lines and so forth. And actually, reading back on the language of the motion, which we did continue through the process, we were using that as direction and also our own judgment on what we thought a port recovery plan would instruct. How do all these pieces fit together? Why is it important that following a disaster that we have immediate communications with the Coast Guard captain of the port to understand, has he closed the port or has he opened it, and then facilitate that information to the business people so they can we want them to make business decisions clearly aimed at using the port as soon as possible. Then we put out our own damage assessment teams, and there's certain pieces of the infrastructure that we do own, and we need to be able to get our engineering and our contracting elements in motion very quickly to do our part, to get our parts of the infrastructure repaired, prioritized, and repaired. But because the way our arrangements are with our tenants, they actually have big chunks of responsibility in terms of the actual cargo moving equipment and infrastructure on their terminals. The container cranes and so forth are largely the responsibilities of our tenants to get that equipment running. Then we have to go back to the government and look at railroads, bridges, other pieces of components. So we have to be kind of the clearinghouse for this information to try to look for the most direct path between whatever's happened, the damage assessment, and getting cargo moving again. So that's.
I mean, I guess what I would say is that's obvious. For instance, on page 13, about a ship sinking, it talks about why a ship would sink. And then it goes on, no matter what the cause, the result is a ship blocking a major waterway. Okay, that was sort of the point of saying, what's your point? I mean, what's your plan? And then it goes on to say, once the port is reopened, vessels will be able. That's where I wanted this to go. How do you get it reopened? Do you have I don't know, who writes an overturned ship?
Right.
Who dredges a channel? What if there's 3 or 4 ships that are, torpedoed?
Right.
That's where do you have the number of
Yeah,
who you call?
The answer is we have to go to U.S. Coast Guard, who has to go to the federal
But, I mean, are we ready to do that as quickly as possible? What if half the workforce didn't show up the next day? I think for me, it was about the next day. What happens the next day? You've already done your evacuation. You've done your port emergency preparedness. Hopefully, we prevented it. The day of the disaster happened. It's the next day when you show up. Everybody shows up. Does everybody? What if our, some of you guys didn't make it back? Who gets this port up and running? Do we have? Do the terminals all know what they need to do? How do we clear the main channel? How do we? How do we get? What if over 3/4 of the ILW didn't make it? Where are we on the work? How do you access more workforce? I think I really wanted, if someone were to go the day after, and a lot of key people weren't around, is there a manual?
Okay.
Is there a book that someone could actually access?
You're absolutely right.
That I think that's what I was looking for. I mean, when I read, Caltrans may be responsible for the bridges. Okay. I was hoping by this time you would have a list. Who's responsible for the bridge? Who's responsible for the Harbor Freeway? Who's responsible for the Gerald Desmond, the Vincent Thomas? Not Caltrans may be responsible. There was another line in here that said, the Port of Long Beach is nearby, and it may be impacted. I was horrified that we paid money to have someone tell us that the Port of Long Beach was nearby.
I see it. So let me.
So help me out here. This
hopefully.
felt like, someone just tried to put a lot of paragraphs together so it looked good. There was no information in this that anybody would not have already known. I wanted, do we really know the day after, where are those phone numbers? Where is, I don't even know how you would upright a ship, but I'm sure you guys probably do. But what if you didn't show up? Where is that manual on reopening the port, clearing the main channel, dredging it? What if, what about the cranes? Who's, and I understand that you are the Port Authority and everybody has separate responsibilities, but I think in a major disaster, even with these kind of business arrangements and tenant arrangements, it seems to me there ought to be something that supersedes your normal day-to-day relationships with your tenants to get America's port back up and running in the quickest way. That's what my thinking was. And maybe you're going to tell me that's impossible. There'll never be a manual.
No, not at all. I didn't
Okay.
tell you that at all. In fact, again, would agree with you, but want to reemphasize that I think a large part of where the disconnect might be is we're looking at a document that's not intended, at least from our standpoint, that's not where we're looking to resolve some of those recovery issues. It's more of in our response plans. And those are some of the things that we'd be happy to share with you. The response plans are where we would have the appropriate contacts, protocols, and then the execution procedures.
I think that's what I think that was the intent of the motion.
Right.
Like, page 74. After severe impact, there may well be problems in gaining sufficient personnel to work cargo in the port. Okay. How are you going to deal with that?
So the linking of this plan with other plans
Yeah.
that are in existence, there are, especially through the Area Maritime Security Committee, the operations branch has some well thought out, well developed, well tested standing plans in regards to our actual response to those emergencies. With those are communication wheels with the appropriate numbers, the response entities.
So is that written
and
down
the
somewhere?
Protocols, they are, yes.
See, I would think you would take section, 10A on there may not be enough sufficient personnel, and you would refer to
Right, with the
something.
the staffing.
How do you get more personnel?
Staffing models are also contained there.
And does ILW have a backup plan?
Those are
What's their backup plan
Well-
if half their workforce was not able to make it into work?
And that is also, again, not something that we would view as part of the recovery plan, but actually part of the response plan. We've actually put that ahead as far as our staging and our preparation for getting to the recovery stages. Recovery and business resumption for us is more of a mechanical operation that has to be done after we've restored things to normalcy. So,
But
knowing where the
okay, so
steps
maybe
will
we're
be-
talking the same thing. I am assuming restoring things to normalcy is part of recovery.
They are. There's a blending, and I think what we have to do again is find the sinking points where we can sink this
No
plan.
pun intended.
Right. Yeah, no pun with that. The sinking
Yeah.
points between this plan and the other existing plans that are there. I think in our trade, one of the pitfalls probably is coming up with the appropriate syntax that talks about at what levels of the incident are we actually talking about. A lot of forethought has gone into working with our emergency preparedness division here within the city of LA, the police department, fire department, and the other appropriate agencies to work out these plans where we pre-stage just about every element of our response to emergencies in the region. So when it comes to staffing plans, minimal skeleton plans, communication plans, and fallback plans, I think we probably have most of your concerns covered, but in a different format. And I think it'd be appropriate for us to come back.
Well,
For this.
I think you're right to an extent. I think your emergency response, though, as you said, is a bare minimum skeletal, this is how we just sort of eke
No.
by. Is it really getting America's port back up, running, goods movement, cargo being loaded and unloaded again?
And I may have miscommunicated when I said that. What I'm trying to communicate is that what we have is a plan for if we've got everyone showing up to work, and based upon what we've learned from Rita and Katrina and other emergencies, what do we do when we have a skeletal crew? Or there may be times where we want to minimize the folks who would respond to a particular emergency and start to capitalize on what resources we have. We've already started getting city employees familiar with 800 call-in numbers. We're working on being able to have collection points for employees throughout the county region where we can collect them and bring them into work using our resources if we were to have a failure of the infrastructure. So those
And
things,
is that written down somewhere?
They are, yes. Yes.
Okay.
Parts of those are in secure plans. Some of those things we'd be more than happy to share with you, possibly in a closed session scenario. The other areas, again, that should show up in a document like that, which would be a public document, we'd be more than happy to dress it up and bring it back. I think those components and those annexes can be referenced. And
This is like a table of contents without
Content.
without content. Dare I ask how much the port paid for this?
It was, I believe it was about 50,000, but they're not done yet, or they're going to fix it up more. That was that in conjunction with some other work and conducting some exercises.
Did you guys actually read this? When you got to the paragraph that said the Port of Long Beach is nearby, and it may be impacted?
Yeah, we'll make it what you want it.
Well, it's not even you make it what it want to be. General Dynamics gave you a I don't know.
I think we're in agreement that there needs to be some more linkages between this and what are true plans with content.
Again,
I think that's the word of the
yeah.
day.
Well, and I think unfortunately, it's about preparing for the worst. I would like to see us prepared for the worst. And it sounds like you've got some components out there. But again, if you didn't show up,
I have to tell you, at the end
if
of
you didn't show up, if Dr. Nats didn't show up the next day, it's the day after. And is there a place that
At the end of the day, I do believe, Madam Chair, that I think that those plans are well developed, they are well thought out. I think we can do a better job, I think, of communicating where those plans are without really getting into some of the sensitive.
Yeah, I don't want you to breach any security, but for instance, I would like to have a better sense that the terminal operators also are, even though they're separate, even though you don't have control over them, that I would think that you could ask them, each one of them. And I know they have, security plans.
We've actually been working quite closely with the terminal operators. There's another document that we created in conjunction with that one that the Coast Guard asked us to do. It's called the Port-Wide Trade Resumption Resiliency Plan. And the terminal operators were brought in for 2 lengthy work sessions where we went through with them and went through all the port recovery scenario beginning to end. And the purpose of this plan development was really a gap analysis. This is really more of a gap analysis than a plan, and it's based on some federal funding that's coming our way, and it's to identify gaps based on the current situation. So we worked with them. We held business continuity planning training was a day-long session where the terminal operators came in, and we basically went through all business continuity elements and helped them build their own business continuity plans for their terminals. So we're continuing to work with them.
Well, you bring up a good point about grants. Part of what I know you both understand is, we're still trying to seek Homeland Security dollars for the port, and it seems to me if you had this stuff very well documented and worked out, it would be easier to access more dollars because we have something specific to pay for.
And that's what this plan does. This plan calls out for investments in emergency power, communications, other kind of infrastructure recovery type preparations that can be made.
Could I ask a question?
Yes, please.
If you look back at, I guess, 74, 75, 76?
Sanino?
Yeah, right,
76.
76.
76.
Okay. Have you looked about what happened then?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, and then also, what happened in 9/11? What did you do in 9/11? Anything?
Likewise, I think every time that there's something significant occurs, and it's on a global scale.
Right.
We looked at the events, even off Somalia, as in regards to piracy and other issues. Every time, I think there's a revisit, not just a dusting off of the plan to see are we in compliance. Every time we take the particulars from the various events that occur, there are standing committees that meet, and the work group not only includes public safety responders, but also includes the stakeholders, which includes the terminal operators and labor representatives.
Yeah.
Those are the times where we sit down and talk about what do we truly have here, where are the gaps. This gap analysis plan that Director Cummings' group worked on furiously with the Coast Guard, I think tells a better story, probably in some areas than you might have with the recovery plan there. But at no time would I want us to walk away from the table leaving you with the feeling that the appropriate groups don't get together and really talk about not where all of our strengths are, but where are the deficiencies, what are the gaps, and how do we operate using our least level of efficiency so that we can come up with and optimize both getting things to normalcy, getting back to a state of recovery, and then getting back to true business resumption. And that includes dialogue.
Well, that's what I
with
asked for.
Port of Washington.
That's exactly what I asked you to present to this committee.
So that means that this document here missed the mark, but the information
I would get my money back.
needs to go into a document. So that's something that I'm sure that Director Cummings' group can take.
Like,
back
I would
to-
think you would, yeah. I hear you, and I know you do emergency preparedness drills. I've been a part of them. So I feel very secure that you guys regularly do emergency preparedness drills. I feel like that all the time, but I do feel like stepping away today, I'm not confident that the day after some major disaster, that somewhere someone can pick up a manual and get back into business. Hopefully you would have, there would be a whole section for ILWU. And what is their plan? Again, if half their workforce couldn't get in or was killed.
And those are the.
And where is that?
Those are the components that we go into our actual response plans. And those are the things that we plan around. What if no one shows up?
Right.
What if we're running on half power? What if half of the roads are available?
All right, so where is that
And-
document?
And again, that's another document that we would show up and be happy to.
Is it complete, or are you working on it still?
I don't think any of those documents, frankly, will ever be complete. I think our last visit here with Director Holmes, the discussion was that most of these documents, most of the planning that goes into it is continual. The groups meet regularly. We had an all-agency group meeting yesterday in San Pedro where a number of the stakeholders were working.
Right, and then who documents those meetings? Like, again, what if all those people didn't show up that have been meeting?
what if they all don't show up?
Yeah, after, the day after.
And again, I think that's what a lot of the meetings are geared towards.
Okay,
It's
so, but
so-
is that
so-
are those meetings documented? You know what I mean? Are you writing that down somewhere?
Yes,
Is it information that can be accessed?
The end goal, and I think you said it, so we're somewhat in violent agreement, is that the end goal is that any
Yeah.
person who's
Right.
on duty at the time,
Right.
at the switch, can go to the notebook,
Right.
and flip to the
Right.
section, and start working through what the
Right.
experts have decided.
Right,
Right down to, this is how many flares we need.
right,
Exactly. How many
Okay.
radios, how much equipment. Those
Right.
plans are standing. That's.
right. And again, I do feel like there's a response and then there's complete recovery. You're back in business.
Right.
And I'm just hoping, I'm not feeling like it's all there yet.
The emergency preparedness model of today is to start building the response with the recovery in mind. So I think a lot of those things have morphed in that direction. Certainly at a city level, our emergency preparedness division has worked towards that. Our last workshop in Arrowhead, where all of the city agencies and some county and federal agencies were also present, that's what's being designed now. So I think that, you know, again, we may have some things that we need to do to get this up to that level. But the good news is that we can sync information that is already standing, good, solid content,
Yes.
and put it in.
I think that's what needs to happen. I mean, I feel very confident in both of you. I mean, if you and John Holmes, the three of you guys showed up the next day, you know, I'm very confident that, you know, things would go in the right direction. But if you three don't show up,
No, my goal-
is there, your
My
goal is to
goal
show up?
And the instruction to staff, no, I may watch on CNN, the instruction to staff, the model would be, is for the newest P2, the newest police
Yeah,
officer, to
there
get
you
out of the
go.
car, open the book, and start going through the
Thank
plans that the experts have developed.
you.
And also have contact with the key experts globally, that would help in mitigating whatever emergency.
Yeah, and are those phone numbers right there?
Jim Collins said that we should begin with the end in mind as we move towards grade. And that's really part of the premise of all of our standing plans. Now, we're starting to migrate towards the end in mind as we plan for preventing things, detecting them, responding to them. A lot of our recovery work should be done. A lot of the things that we were keen on in our visit to Israel was looking at how in a emergency situation, things can be brought back to a state of normalcy and get society back to a state
Right.
of normalcy quickly.
Right.
That's largely a part of the response more
Right.
so than the recovery.
Right. And I live there, and, I go to sleep looking at the port, and I wake up looking at it. And there's really still not a day that I'm not concerned. And I think the farther away we get from 9/11, I think the closer we are to another attack. And I know, I don't hear all the chatter, but I know it exists. And I know the port is still one of those targets. And according to conventional wisdom, America's port, when it was shut down for 10 days on a controlled shutdown with the last lockout, it was $2 billion a day to our economy. So it's an attractive target. It would impact the global economy. I think if somebody saw this book, they would go, well, those guys, they're not going to be ready to get back up and running. So,
What I would engage is that we'd come back and give you another update, especially with a compilation of some of the information that I believe resides possibly in other plans and would help out. At the same time, we've taken the steps to begin filling out our emergency response guide, which I think might even be more appropriate. The emergency response guide, again, would be the document where we talk about these responses with some of the technical and specific information, types of information that you're talking about.
If I
okay,
could
well,
jump
I
in.
won't be happy until I see that.
Okay, let me jump in for one quick second. I mean, obviously, the chair is right on the mark. We need to feel more comfort, okay? Couple of questions. Could you come back when you come back next time and we do a little closed session part?
Absolutely.
Okay, because I'd like a closed session part, okay, where we can ask questions that you feel comfortable in talking about in closed session. So let's make sure you have some of that together. Secondly, Jane Harmon has been a big fighter for terrorism, homeland security issues. Do you feel your ties to Washington at this point, as we go into a transition to administration, will give us more federal support? Because that's always been an issue for us, is getting the strength out of the federal government to appreciate what Ms. Hahn just said about the $2 billion and the impact on our economy. It's an extraordinary part. It's one of our more vital economic engines in America. So if that were to be disruptive, I don't care if it's the tsunami, frankly, that might happen, or the earthquake, or a terrorist attack, if something does happen. So I'd like to get a sense, when you come back, of how we feel about the federal grants and the monies out of Washington that can continue to complement and support our efforts here locally.
Councilmember Rosendahl, we'd be happy, first off, to come back and speak not only publicly, but also in closed session, so that we could share some of those sensitivities that are designed for protection of the public. In regards to the transition team reaching out, I can tell you confidently that I've had at least 2 phone calls from the transition team, and their concern was port security and whether or not we
Good.
have adequate representation.
Good.
And today, as we're sitting here, the reason that I'm actually in Captain Holmes' spot, because he's in Washington, D.C. this week, working towards matters of port security. So I think that we're well represented there. There's a level of comfort that can be had, understanding that the new transition team recognizes where port security should be in their overall scheme of issues that they're going to have to deal with coming in this,
Terrific.
To this new campaign.
So I look forward to that report as well,
Absolutely.
as how that goes. Great.
I'm happy to do it.
Okay, so I think that the action is to note and file this plan, but I think more importantly, we would like a report back on, as you say, syncing the real procedures with what,
As a caveat, part of the discussion might be that since this was intended to be a public document, there will be references. Part of that syncing, I just would like to say up front, might be references to standing secure plans, where the information about where we'll stage our citizens during emergency might be held close until that time comes, so that we don't put them in harm's way. There's certain things that
True, but I mean, just a section on, foreign ports, or a section on foreign ports need to be contacted. Okay, again, duh.
who, where,
When, exactly,
Contacts.
when P2 comes in the next morning,
who do I talk to?
exactly, contact names. I mean, just basic, and if you have it, great, but if the disaster were to happen tonight, tomorrow, when someone came in, would they be able to follow this table of contents?
Yeah, and again, the disconnect probably is that P2 won't be pulling that document off the shelf. They'll be going to the department's emergency response guide and opening up the response guide and looking there and having defined information about who to contact. And also, in the case of contact, they're just anecdotally, where we're contacting outside the port, we're looking for their number 2s. So I think the plans was built around the lowest common denominator, but we're talking really about a different plan. So we'd be happy to come back and report.
This was the lowest common denominator.
As far as
It was the
plans,
lowest. Okay, so we'd like to come back and get a bit better sense. I will tell you, after 2 years, this is a very disappointing document. Again, I'd get my money back. Arnold Sachs, public comment. When do we want the report back?
Yes, good morning, Arnold Sachs. And when I saw this item on your agenda, I thought it was actually going to deal with recovering the $90 million that I'm still waiting to find out about. Wrong again. Darn. Can we recover maybe $1 million? Maybe the money was spent on the report. And if this is a paid report for the port, does the airport have a plan and LAX have a plan similar? And who did their report? Still, $90 million and counting. Aren't you interested at all where that $90 million
I am.
went?
I am. This is our joint facilities container inspection, or joint container inspection facility that he's referring to. Where is that? And maybe we agendize that sometime in the new year.
Actually, I believe that we agreed to come back and
Yeah, I think-
share information on
Yeah.
that during the last meeting, so it's not been calendared yet.
Okay.
I'd be happy to come back.
Why don't we agendize that, and then maybe in January also come back and give us the syncing of the port recovery plan and the response plan, so that we're a little bit more confident.
In that closed session stuff, too.
Fine,
Happy to do that.
but I think there will be a lot of it that's not closed session, like the list of foreign ports and. I mean, probably anybody could probably Google that, but again, on the day after, you'd want to make sure that was easily accessible.
Let's hope we don't pay somebody to Google stuff.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, item 2. Do we want to give them a date in January, or just January? We'll work with you on a date.
Madam Chair, just for a point of clarification, you want item 1 to continue for 30 days,
Yeah.
60 days?
Right, so I guess we're not, yeah, thanks.
Under item 2, we have consideration of motion Han Rosendahl, which requests the Department of Airports to report on its efforts to promote regionalization and to report on its plans to work with the City of Palmdale in promoting air service at Palmdale Regional Airport. The Department of Airports Director of Air Service Marketing is here, as well as Executive Office staff to respond to your motion.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members
morning.
of the committee. I'm Executive Office Staff, I guess, Mike Molina, and
morning.
I'm joined by Mark Thorpe, our Air Service Marketing Director, to give you lots of information
Good.
and lots of details on our regionalization update pursuant to the motion that you introduced, and in particular talk a little bit about what's happening with
Yeah.
the saga at Palmdale.
Yeah.
So we have a presentation that I ask you to spend some time looking at, conscious of the time.
Right.
The presentation is really in 3 parts. First, it has to do with statistics, and it's important for us to continually look at what are the numbers that are facing us at our airports, just to have a sense of where we are today. Secondly, we want to talk about what we've done in regionalization, in particular Palmdale and Ontario, and thirdly, talk a little bit about what we're going to do in 2009. But just some preliminary issues regarding statistics before Mark begins. Regionalization is working, and we're going to show you some stats that'll show you that in the last 20 years we have done an effective job at dispersing air traffic throughout the region, which I think is a successful thing. And the reality is that LAX, as was perceived to be a congested airport, especially through the settlement agreement and looking at the number of about 79 million annual passengers sometime next decade, is not going to happen. We're seeing a drastic reduction in passengers, so the perception or the anticipation of reaching 79 million passengers by 2015 certainly is not going to be a reality. So LAX as a congested airport is not necessarily the case. In fact, we're seeing this year a reduction in numbers that brings us into the early 1990s, last time we saw these kinds of numbers. So those are just some important.
What will we see this year, at the end of the year?
59 million?
Well, actually, there's actually a slide about it, 59.1 million annual passengers. It's, yeah, it takes us back back into the 90s.
So Mark's going to go through a number of slides on stats, and then we'll talk about Palmdale.
Okay,
Yeah, thank you, Michael.
quickly.
Okay, I will. I'll be very quick. There's a lot of slides. I'll fly through them very quickly, but please ping me if you have questions. The first slide is really kind of to bring us back to where we were a few months ago when I was before you and spoke to you about the jet fuel crisis that we were going through then.
Right.
In reality, the jet fuel prices have come down. They began to moderate at about the end of July. So the cost challenge that the airlines faced has obviously begun to moderate. Unfortunately, for 3 reasons, the U.S. airlines have still continued to lose money. Number one is that jet fuel prices have lagged in coming down when compared to oil prices for a number of reasons. One of them was the fact that the hurricanes in Texas, although it didn't hit most of the refining capacity in the U.S., they hit one of the most important areas for jet fuel refining capacity. So jet fuel has lagged in its price fall compared to oil in general. The second is that as the economy slowed down, there's been fewer passengers for the airlines to carry. And the third is that some of these carriers entered into futures contracts that were making them a lot of money 3 or 4 months ago,
Right.
and now they're underwater.
Which one of those are
United and Southwest.
I thought Southwest was still.
Theirs were pretty low, actually.
Yeah,
For
they were like
this year,
$51.
They were 51 for this year. They rose up into the 80s through about 2011. So a lot of their future oil contracts, their future futures contracts during coming years will be underwater. They'll lose money from that on those contracts. But United's lost a significant amount this year. They entered into futures contracts about 110 a barrel, $100 a barrel, which is of course been
Wow.
pretty disastrous for them. And
It was good for a while.
yeah.
Okay.
So you sort of have those three things that are still causing a lot of financial distress in the airline industry.
Okay.
And obviously, what jet fuel prices have given back, the slowing economy has taken away, as slide 4 shows. It's something we're all really familiar with, obviously, but that's going to continue to be the case. So carriers will continue to struggle with maybe not so much the cost side of their business, but the revenue generation challenge that they're going to face. The good news is slide 5 points out is that regionalization, as Mike mentioned, has been working. This goes back to 1975, but really 1980 was the peak year of dependence in the region on LAX for air travel. And since 1980, we've seen that LAX share of traffic drop from 74% to 57%. The even better news within that, when you look at slide 6, within that story is that when you take those two sections of that 75 to 2007 period, you see two different stories. From 1975 to 2000, most of the growth in the region was at LAX, which is the tall blue bar. 44 million out of 70.9 million total annual passengers in growth in that 25-year period happened at LAX. Since 2000, LAX has actually lost traffic, passenger traffic. Every other airport has grown within the Southern California region. So it's further evidence that not only has regionalization been happening during the past 3 decades, but its pace has quickened during the last.
What
7
percentage
years.
of what we've lost, though, has actually gone to the other airports, or have we just lost?
And most of it's domestic traffic. We've actually set record levels of international traffic during this same period. So most of the 5.8 million has gone to Long Beach. Long Beach since 99 or 2000 has gone from 350,000 passengers a year to about 2.5 to 3 million, I think, now by the end of this year. So you've had growth in the domestic traffic at Orange County, Long Beach, and to a lesser extent Burbank and Ontario. That's come from LAX, really. Now, I mean, to be realistic, though, as a business, that is something that is of concern for us. Not so much the domestic traffic, regaining that at LAX, but we need to grow that traffic back because we need the revenue to be able to pay for modernization and for our operating expenses. So it's not, I mean, for us as an airport operator, it's not a great story that we're losing traffic, but in as much as that traffic has made regionalization happen, it's a good story. It's the domestic traffic that doesn't necessarily need to be at LAX in large numbers has gone to other airports. The next slide is a forecast for where we expect LAX to be by the end of the year. These were prepared in August when we first learned of the service cuts. The good news is that in September and October, both LAX and Ontario, traffic's performed a little bit better than we expected. There's still a drop, obviously, this year versus last year, but the demand in the market's been a little bit more robust than we projected. But we expect by the end of the year that the total traffic level at LAX will be about 59 million annual passengers. And the next slide shows the same figures for Ontario. We didn't break out domestic and international because international is such a small segment of the market out there, but we'll be down about 14.4% we project at Ontario for the year. Now next year we'll see a much more significant decline because the downturn will be throughout 2009, not just during the last quarter. Slide 9, I think, is an important slide. It hints at what we'll talk about in the third section of the presentation, which is that Ontario is a great opportunity for us and what we see as our growth airport in Southern California, because all the other airports in the region are constrained for one reason or another, whether it's for their political growth constraints or just simple infrastructural constraints on their ability to accommodate more traffic. Now, the second section.
So I was just reading, was John Wayne the airport that was just mentioned recently for expansion?
Yeah, that's a great.
Is that what you consider Santa Ana?
Yeah,
Or-
SNA. Sorry,
Okay.
those are airport codes.
So
Yeah, it takes some clarification of what's
Okay.
happening with Orange County.
Okay,
Orange County,
but they have a passenger cap.
yeah, they have the passenger cap that remains, and the curfew remains. The 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. operational curfew remains. What they're doing is adding gates. If you drive by John Wayne Airport at any time in the evening, you see a lot of planes sitting at the end of the
Right.
runway. They don't have they don't have gates to park a lot of the planes on.
Okay.
They're going to add 14 gates. They're going to, I think, double their gate capacity, but they're not adding any real operational capacity. The runway's not longer, so you can't have larger airplanes fly in there. They're not doing away with the curfew or the passenger cap. So
So you don't think they'll grow?
no, I mean, unless the cap's removed, they legally can't. I mean, they can't go beyond 10 million annual passengers, and they can't.
And
There's
where are
only-
they right now?
They're 9, I think 9.8. They're pretty close. Now the cap, I think, increases in a couple of years. I don't know that exact number, but we can get that for you. But it's not by a
It seems to
significant
me they
amount.
wouldn't build 14 gates just to accommodate,
Well,
parked,
the way they're
parked
financing
airplanes.
it-
I mean, that was the big deal with LAX. It was the gates. I mean, that was what the settlement was, that we could only have so many gates because that was equated to, obviously.
The only real change
Yeah.
in their operation that they're going to, I do believe they're building an FIS facility so they can have flights to Mexico. But
Okay.
no, the plan is, and the way it's financed, the reason why the airlines actually weren't willing to pay for the construction of those new gates is that there wasn't going to be an opportunity for them to grow their traffic there. So
Okay.
passengers actually pay an additional surcharge
Okay.
to pay for those gates.
All right.
So so yeah, it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense, but that airport has been operating that way for a while.
Yeah, except for you said the cap might be lifted in a couple of years.
It's, well, I think under
When
the
you
terms
said
of
that,
the-
I thought, well, that's
Well, it
why
goes
they're
up
adding.
I believe it's only by about 1 million passengers or so.
Okay.
It's not
Oh.
a significant
Okay.
increase.
All right.
But we can get that exact number for you.
Okay,
This-
regionalization.
Yeah, before we get into the regionalization plan, which, as Mike mentioned, is the third area we wanted to address, we wanted to give you a history of what's happened with Palmdale. I know it's been in the news quite a bit.
Yes.
There's slides 12 through 17, or 16. I won't go through very detailedly.
Okay.
But that's just really a history of everything that we've done in the last 5 years since my division was created at LAWA, to try and market Palmdale and try and bring service into the airport. And everything in blue denotes something that we did in coordination with the city of Palmdale, and at least with the city of Palmdale, and usually with the county as well. But we've worked very closely with the city of Palmdale over the years in various airline meetings, with the application for federal grants, which we ultimately received in 2006. The city of Palmdale worked with us to select United Airlines as the carrier to serve the market. So those 5 slides, if you went through them, that really has the high points, or the most important, the most salient points in our relationship with the city of Palmdale and our air service development efforts for Palmdale Regional Airport since 2003.
These slides are important because one can get the impression that somehow LAWA did nothing at Palmdale for a number of years, short of the United Airlines signing United Airlines to fly for 18 months, or get the impression that LAWA did all this without Palmdale's participation, the city of Palmdale's participation. Mark is too modest of a person to say that through his direction, there was an aggressive campaign with the city of Palmdale to talk to as many as a dozen airlines about the possibility of Palmdale, to have continual meetings and communication with Palmdale and the airlines community in trying to attract business at Palmdale.
Which didn't happen.
Which didn't happen.
Well, and even to highlight what Mike mentioned, the actual grant that we got, the $900,000 federal grant, was actually given to the city of Palmdale, not to LAWA. We can't actually subsidize air service by an airline at our airports. We're not allowed to. So the city of Palmdale was a recipient. They entered into the revenue guarantee agreement. It was a partnership, a coalition between LAWA, the city of Palmdale, the county of Los Angeles.
So where are we right now? Did we give them control? Did LAWA?
No, we did not give them control.
Okay.
The city of Palmdale, through the mayor,
Right.
has recently said that they are interested in, quote, running the airport themselves.
Right. Because that Daily Breeze quote that you have here.
That's correct.
has LAWA gives Palmdale control of airport.
And more recently, Supervisor Antonovich talked about the possibility of emancipating themselves from LAWA so that they can
Right.
operate the airport themselves. There are a couple issues that are still remaining before any kind of
We haven't
serious
given them
discussion of that.
control.
One, it has to do with the lease. We have to remember that the area where Palmdale Airport's operations have been of recently, especially the United Airlines project, took place on leased property. We don't own the runway. We don't own the land that the terminal sits on.
Right.
That is all Air Force property. We own 17,000 acres across the street for some future airport that will happen.
Right.
But in the meantime, where the operations are right now are not LAWA-owned properties. They are leased from the airport.
Okay.
City of Palmdale maintains that that lease has expired.
Oh, okay.
LAWA does not maintain that.
Okay.
Our city attorney is very clear in saying that the lease still very much belongs to the city of Los Angeles or
When
LAWA.
do we think it expires?
2017, according to what we have.
Okay.
So we are in discussion right now with Air Force to clarify that. So before we even get into any kind of discussion, Mayor,
And the board just voted to have more studies.
the board voted on a motion by Commissioner Velasco to look at what would it cost for an airline or an air carrier to really do service at Palmdale. They wanted to take a look one more time at that kind of scenario. For
Do you
them,
think we would have done that in all this?
we have.
That's what slide 17 shows.
Okay.
What we've actually spent.
However, the industry is different today than it was even 2 years ago when the most recent study was done. So it'll show where
But
the industry
we have done
is.
that. We have done that
Yes.
study. They
Yeah.
want to do one more study.
Yes.
Okay, the 17,000 acres, when did we buy it?
1968, I
It was
wanna
about
say.
40 years ago, yes.
And what is it worth today?
That's a great question.
We'd have to ask our properties people.
Could you find that out?
Yes. Yeah. And one thing to just sort of put this in context, when we talk about shifting our focus from Palmdale to Ontario, part of what we're talking about is during the recession that we're going to go through and in the next several years, the changes the airline industry is going to go through. 93 other small airports in the United States have lost all their air service. So Palmdale's not the only one. So this is not an environment right now where you're going to find a lot of carriers willing or able to go into a market like that. So as we address these issues with the Air Force,
How much is the lease that we're paying them?
that's another good question for our properties people. We can find that out.
Are we paying the Air Force a cost for the lease for Palmdale? Or is that just in writing?
It's a 60-acre lease. I don't know the exact terms. We can find out. But for example, the Air Force up there
I mean, you're basically saying you don't think it's a good environment right now
Correct.
to have a service there. Yet we're kind of holding on to this lease.
Well, and we still also.
We believe in regionalization, but it's like you said, we'd like to kind of know what all the pieces
Do we pay an
are.
annual fee for that lease?
That's what I just asked.
We do, and actually,
What it
part of
was.
the challenge, I believe the numbers about when we haven't had service there, I think we spent, if you look at our annual reports, I think it's about $4 million a year that we spend just to have 17,000 acres up there. To operate the airport during that 18-month period that we've had United service there, we spent about $5 million just to operate the terminal. So without any air service, we still spend several million dollars.
If I-
Yeah,
can I-
we'd
The
like-
question you're asking is
Yeah.
the property that is leased by the airport, how
Right.
much do we spend annually?
Right.
With or without air service?
Right.
We'll get that to you.
Yeah, and I'd also like to inherently, in that question, is question Palmdale, period. That value of the 17,000 acres, and should we sell it? Should we get out of the phoniness of Palmdale being regional unless we really want to put the transportation infrastructure in place and really want to spend the money necessary to make it? I'm tired of talking about Palmdale as something if it isn't something, especially in our budget crisis
Yeah.
situation as a city and everything
Right.
else. Because realistically speaking, in my opinion, Palmdale's value is if we invest in transportation infrastructure and we have to build out that airport into a real airport, not a cow airport in a phony game, or we don't. If you were Denver, you did. I was in Denver the other day. Unbelievable, right? I was just in New York and Chicago. I've seen 3 airports, and I'm looking at airports now like I never did before from a different name. I actually eat in them, and I check out the concessions and all that kind of stuff. I mean,
I shop in them.
yeah, I used to do that in Pittsburgh when I was going off to Coudersport,
Well,
Pennsylvania.
it's all research.
Yeah, this is first-hand experience about airports are becoming very, very personal to us all. So I really want to have an
Right.
honest analysis of Palmdale
Right.
today and tomorrow.
Right.
Fine, we
Right.
can do that.
I mean, the last time we studied doing a high-speed rail from Palmdale to LAX, what we found was more people would then just take the high-speed rail to LAX, and it was not the reverse. So that was the last big study that we found out
And
about
part of
that.
the motion on Monday was also to work with the High-Speed Rail Authority, not just for Palmdale, but also
Right.
for Ontario
Right.
and LAX, to discuss how the recent passage of the
Right.
proposition and the
It's
plan
like, I
affects
think, it's
our-
like you need to get all the old studies, too, and somebody needs to go through them and say, what's changed, what hasn't changed?
Correct.
And you're right, are we holding on to something? Why don't we move very quickly to regionalization?
Yeah.
The Office of Regionalization, what do we hope to gain from that?
Okay.
We know that's
Great.
one of
I
our
was
our
hoping to hear your
concerns.
Ontario's.
Yeah, let's
Yeah.
jump to slide 22. I can talk through the points on slide 20. The reality is you know, as we've looked at Palmdale, we'll get that analysis to you, but our own internal assessment is Ontario makes a lot more sense right now.
Okay.
Demographically, its catchment area includes 7 million residents of Southern California.
Right.
There's 7 million annual passengers there. It's a proven market. When we've gotten new service and we've supported it like we did with ExpressJet, ExpressJet went out of business, went back to being a regional airline because of fuel. But in that time, they stimulated traffic by 60% in 15 markets. So, you know, it's a completely different story. We get a great return on our investment in that market. So our focus, the first point of regionalization, is the focus really shifts to Ontario.
How long have we had this Office of Regionalization?
It's brand new.
It's brand new.
Effectively,
Is it here? We've established it?
It's here.
Yes, it's here. And it'll
Okay.
be a continuation of stuff of the effort that this division's been making for 5 years, but it really puts it in there's an office that will specifically oversee.
Okay.
It'll be
It's a
within-
central nerve system, the way I like to describe it.
Okay.
At LAWA, there were many divisions working on regionalization efforts,
Right.
whether it's ground transportation or air service.
Right.
We needed to centralize those efforts
Right.
under Mark's leadership so that we
So
can.
Mark is the point person.
Correct.
Are you the direct, what's your title?
I'm the Director of Air Service Development or Air Service Marketing, either one.
Okay.
It's a kind of interchangeable title. So if you look at slide 23, it's under Gina Marie and Mike's direction. I'll oversee this Office of Regionalization, but the important thing is, as Michael said, it brings together, sort of breaks down the silos that we sometimes
Right,
end
right.
up with.
Okay. So what your big goals for
Our big
regionalization
goals,
are?
slide 24, it's number
Right.
one, to restore the service that we've lost at Ontario during 2008. And that includes the Southwest flights that we've lost, service that we've lost in the past to markets like New York, Chicago, Minneapolis, restore service in some of the former ExpressJet markets that were very successful and profitable, but for oil being $140 a barrel.
This is all in Ontario.
Yes, it's all in Ontario. Increasing flights to Canada and Mexico, assisting Aeroterm in developing its cargo facilities and marketing those, to continue to build the successful cargo business out in Ontario. The second initiative is to, this within the same initiative of growing traffic in Ontario, it's to host a regionalization summit. It's to continue to work with the corporate travel and tourism industries to see Ontario as a viable gateway. And then with Palmdale, it's just to continue to facilitate efforts that the city and the county may make. The third initiative is not to develop ground transportation access, because that's not what our business is, but it's to support those efforts. Being involved with the Gold Line, being involved
Right.
with high-speed rail.
We're kind of running out of time. I know you have some questions. Just one of the things, what I'm noticing about this, it seems to be we're focusing our regionalization efforts on Palmdale and Ontario, and not the other airports. Just in these couple of slides, how are we reaching out to all the airports in the region?
That's a great question. It's
Thank you.
through that regionalization summit. I mean, the challenge we have is we can't force them to take more traffic, but we're going to continue to work with them to try
Okay,
and.
one of the places I see it lacking is, I mean, we do have SCAG as an organization. I'm actually vice chair of the Aviation Task Force, and that's part of the sense, is that there is a missing link between all the member cities, many of them who have airports, in SCAG and LAX. It does seem like we've just been focusing on our owned airports and not trying to figure out, the bigger idea of regionalization with all the airports. And I think the summit is a good idea. How are you, and may I encourage you to begin to work with, particularly, me and SCAG, and to maybe help facilitate that summit.
I think it's a great idea. And this is exactly one of those areas where Mark mentioned the silo. We find out that there have been airport employees that have gone to those meetings,
Right.
but are reporting back
Yes.
or a concentration
Right.
is what's needed. It was SCAG who 40 years ago was the organization that said buy Palmdale because the population's moving north.
Right.
So it has always been
Yeah.
a part of our overall
Right.
process. We need to connect more to the aviation committee.
Right. I think that would be one of the things I would suggest.
Let me just
Yeah.
cue in on that first. You know, we have something called SCRAW, right? Southern California Association, blah, blah,
SCRAW,
blah. Okay, all right. And you know what we're doing now. We're doing an analysis of where we go from here. It's pretty much what Ms. Hana's just saying. And we have a team out there. You're working with them, I'm assuming, with Galanter and
Yes.
that other group. Okay. And the purpose of that study is exactly what Ms. Hana's saying, which is where do we go from here and where do we take our energy going forward? Because that didn't work for obvious reasons. It's 20 years of bad history among relationships with Orange County and all that kind of stuff. But we're in a new day, so I look forward to your input into that report, which will help set the direction. Okay?
Mr. Galanter is actually working on incredible linkages for us between Orange County and Ontario Airport.
Good. So make sure that coordination is quick. A couple of quick questions, and then I comment. What is the status of initiating shuttle service from L.A., Ontario to the local metro stations?
That's one of the areas that we need to bring within this Office of Regionalization, the flyaway program. And in the past, we've looked at that, but the difficulty has been finding kind of a viable points to collect. You know, it's all network economics, and it's tough
Sure.
in Southern California to find a point of critical mass to collect people to take them to the airport. So I believe that's our regional planning group, our long-range planning group that looks at the flyaway program, and I think it's just a matter of we have to look and find where there's feedback.
I'd like a report back on the flyaway program that links to Ontario. Okay, we got it going for LAX. It's working well. I want to see where we could possibly do that. Second, I am so happy about Measure R being passed because in there is, and the high-speed rail also passing, that there is now the opportunity to take the metro, which is right next to Ontario, and link it into Ontario, and then to tie it into a viable network system, and even raises the excitement about Anaheim to Ontario also being part of it. Also excites the goal line and how that can fit in. And there are discussions going on right now with the federal government about how Measure R's complement money and economic stimulus from Obama could tie us together. And we could truly give Ontario the ground transportation linkage, which is as critical as it gets for the passenger to get on.
And we're at the table in those discussions, Councilman, and we have Pat Tomchuk from our long-range planning attends the goal line extension committee,
Right.
where the discussion is why should the goal line end at Montclair
Yeah,
as
right,
it is
right,
envisioned
right,
now,
right.
and let's see if we can make the loop into Ontario Airport so it'll connect Union Station to Ontario.
Excellent. And so I'm hoping that the Metro Board, which is now empowered like it's never been before, and you, Mark, which I hear just great reports about you, how you're creating regionalism, are joined at the hip.
Okay.
Because that will create the linkage that is critical for us to go forward.
I think there's also a cargo opportunity there. If I
Yeah.
may,
Big
you know,
time.
I mean, it sits between two rail lines,
Yeah.
and there's no on-off point for cargo to be moved from an airport from air to rail.
Right, and you know the group that's working on the cargo opportunities there and the leasing of the property moving forward. I'm encouraging them, obviously, to keep going and keep moving, because once those linkages are real, we're going to see a lot of cargo going to Ontario there. Frankly, about Palmdale, what I said earlier, I just want to go back to that. I want to be realistic about Palmdale. I want to understand Palmdale, what it costs to really make it a regional airport, no more pie-in-the-sky stuff. It either is or it isn't. And what about that 17,000 acres of land? And what about the lease we're paying on there? So I'm not saying it's over, but I'm certainly saying let's ask those questions about what
You
it
want to see
means
the
us.
options.
I want to see the options on that. Okay, now back to modernization, yes. Expansion, no. That's the motto for LAX. As we go forward with the modernization of the Tom Bradley Terminal, we're now very excited, and I've talked to the mayor about that, about the Green Line getting completed so that when we open up the Bradley Terminal, we get into a people mover and we get into the Green Line and we really begin to get that hook. I'm very comfortable from the mayor's perspective that we will have that linkage. Are you working on that in that regionalism about the Green Line and how that fits in?
Yeah, that falls under this Office of Regionalization. It's not, as Mike mentioned, what the Office of Regionalization really is going to do is bring in various specialties. So it will be our long-range planning people who've typically been involved in that. It's now coordinating that effort with everything else we're doing with regionalization, rather than having them continue to work on that over here and the left hand not necessarily knowing what the right hand's doing. So I'll be increasingly involved in that.
Great.
Let me just ask you one big question. What does LAWA see as the benefit of regionalization?
Well, besides the obvious benefits that everybody wants in terms of the decreased congestion on the freeway, noise pollution, air pollution for the local impacted communities, I think for us as an airport, it makes a lot of sense as a business to grow our traffic as much as we can in Ontario. We made a significant investment out there 10 years ago. It's important for us to be able to accommodate the traffic that we've built and planned to accommodate out there.
Right.
I would say the same thing. It's Ontario.
Right.
We invested $300 million in a facility there in the late 1990s. It's a beautiful terminal.
Right.
It's a beautiful airport. And we want to see it grow.
That's going to be your goal, is Ontario. Because is there an inherent conflict of interest to losing air traffic to non-LA owned airports?
No, it's all the same. I mean, we're the operator of both airports.
No.
Oh, you mean the other airports outside? Well, I mean, for us, in as much as we do need to operate like any business. Yeah, we need to generate as much revenue as we can in our airports.
Of course, that's what I see as the real rub in this whole thing.
But that's why Bradley West is still so important, because we will still maintain being the international.
Yeah, but I see us as not totally embracing regionalization because it hurts business.
Well, no, I don't believe that that's been a detriment at all to LAWA in the past. I mean, to the point of, the last 7 years, we've actually, the growth at a lot of airports has happened while there's been a loss at LAX. I mean, there's been a decline in traffic. I think the reality is there's not a lot of capacity for continued growth at the other airports as they're built right now. So realistically, the growth, it really has to happen at Ontario, any significant levels of growth, if it's not going to happen at the other satellite airports.
And if congestion congestion relief is our goal, then we've got other ways like the Green Line and more flyaways and Okay, we are receiving and filing this. I do have one comment on item 2, and then we'd like to have you maybe report back in 30 days, I think particularly on this idea of the summit and working with SCAG and SCRAW, and maybe a specific report on how we're working together with those organizations. Okay. Arnold Sachs.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Mike.
You're welcome.
The double M's.
Is Arnold still here? No. Okay. All right. It's 10 after 10. What should we do? We've got the convention center. Do we probably need to? Okay. Okay. Let's take item 3 real quickly.
And I think we need to approve 4 too, don't we? We need to
And
approve
4.
4. Which
Do you have to do
Jason
4
did for the
today?
lease.
Why?
Concession
Because the
contracts,
lease-
timeframes.
You don't bring me things that are like you had to have done them last week. Well, I don't appreciate things like
Or
that.
our deputy executive director is saying 4 can wait till your next meeting.
Fine.
Right?
We're gonna continue 4 till next time.
Oh, you're not having a meeting?
Well,
We'll have a meeting now.
It will be deemed approved.
Okay.
It will be deemed approved.
I was asked to take that on consent, but I didn't want to because I just think with advertising, signage, all that stuff, I think we need to vet it a little bit.
What about this one right
Okay,
now?
let's do
Okay.
3.
Under item 3, the Convention Center Department, the City Administrative Officer, and the Mayor submit for council approval a contract with Servicon Systems Incorporated for public area and office custodial services at the Convention Center. This contract would have a term of 3 years, beginning on September 1, 2008, with 2 one-year renewal options. The Convention Center Department estimates that total expenditures over the first 3 years would not exceed $4.8 million, and this would be paid from the Convention Center Department's annual budget.
Okay, who wants to give me a quick overview of this contract?
Terry Sauer, CAO staff. Convention Center has contracted for custodial services for the show area, for show-related services for approximately the last 20 years. The proposed contract is a 3-year agreement replacing the current contractor and would cost approximately $4.8 million over the 3 years. During the Convention Center issued an RFP, received
Right.
7 proposals,
Right.
and selected the current contractor. Our office has reviewed, made a 1022 determination that for the show-related services, it's more economic and feasible to continue the contracting. The Convention Center does have some city staff.
Right. And I think that's what I would like to just hone in on, is that why doesn't the Convention Center directly hire custodians instead of contracting it out? And I know 1022, and we've got to make the case that it is more economical and what's the other word I'm looking
Feasible.
for? Feasible to contract out. I mean, that's part of what we believe in the city. Why? Why were those findings made?
It's typically because of the intermittent nature of the work. The Convention Center does have some full-time staff, custodial staff,
Right.
that does support the administrative and the ongoing
Right.
custodial needs. The problem or the
Well-
challenge the department has encountered in the past is that because of the peaks and valleys, to have a full-time workforce dedicated to show, there'll be
So what
periods-
do these custodians, what is their job description?
They typically work and clean the exhibits and help with the setup of the exhibits. The department can
So
answer
it's
that.
based on the exhibits?
Agnes Cole, Los Angeles Convention Center.
Uh-huh.
Our daytime staff, they take care of the seven a day cleaning for the office space during the daytime. Now, when we have shows, there's a lot of public areas that need to be cleaned. For example, when the Los Angeles Auto Show was in,
Right.
we get a lot of heavy traffic.
Right.
And the restrooms in the public areas, they must be cleaned 3, 4, 5 times a day.
So that's the contract custodian?
That is the contractor, correct. And
And then after the shows, they're not working?
they're not
Not
working,
working.
correct.
I see. So this contract for 3 years just is on
It's
as needed?
as
Yes,
needed.
it's on an as-needed basis based on show activity. They're not brought in every day because some days we have just meetings.
Right.
And our daytime staff are capable
Okay.
of handling that workload.
Right.
Councilmember, we did discuss with General Services to determine if they had the capacity to absorb this work, and
Right.
currently they do not have the capacity and would face the same challenges with the intermittent nature of the work that the Convention Center does, of having full-time staff, but not having, if there's not an event there, then you have more people than you need for the work that's available.
And also, based on the CAO report on page 2, analysis was performed based on 60 hours of work on an annual period, indicating that the contractor was about 1/2 the cost of city staff to do the same amount of work and for the same labor hours.
Yeah, because they're probably part-time and don't get benefits and,
Well,
Okay.
the contractor is in compliance with the city's living wage ordinance as well as equal benefits ordinance, so they do receive some benefits.
some benefits, yeah. Okay. Okay, those were kind of the questions I had. Let me take a couple of public comments. Did you want to say anything? No, okay. Let me take a couple of public comments, and then maybe something else will be brought up. Julie Butcher, Arnold Sachs, and Chuck Tinnen. Oh, you know what, Chuck, you're in public comment, so hang on. I'm still on item, oh, I'm sorry, Arnold is 4. So just Julie.
Good morning. representing SEIU Local 347, we represent custodians that do public work. We'd oppose the contracting of custodial work at the convention center as we have consistently. On this specifically, the department has failed to comply with the contract provisions in our labor agreement. So we've not had the opportunity to really work with the city to figure out how we best do this work. We question the veracity of the numbers, that city staff cost half at the convention center, and that in general services we're able to do the work in a much more equitable way, suggests that there's really room to study how we best do this in the most cost-effective way at a time when we're talking about laying off part-time workers in other city departments. It really is counterintuitive and economically challenging, and I appreciate that these folks will earn a living wage, and many of them may get benefits sometime in their lifetime, but I don't think that's the example that the public employer wants to set.
So you would recommend against approving this?
Yes, I would.
Okay. What would you suggest?
Well, I think that the reason that the notification process and the process of evaluating the cost effectiveness of the work, the purpose of that is to give us a chance to figure out
Right.
how we get this work done.
Right, and you don't feel like you've had that?
No.
Okay. Well, it's very difficult for me to approve this with that comment.
Okay.
So I'm going to have a hard time approving this.
Yes.
Can we get, what do we need? 60 days, 30 days?
Well, we did meet with the union, Council Member Han, on various occasions. We did present our analysis to the union, at which time it was dismissed. And we did have subsequent meetings with them to inform them of the progress of the analysis and the anticipated outcome.
Yeah, and you know what, I mean, I tend to completely agree with Ms. Butcher. You know, I think the city is going to be looking very seriously at layoffs, you know, and I feel a little bit more responsibility for city employees than I do for Servicon workers. I mean, that's just, that's what I have to be more responsible for. So I would like to continue this item. You know, you know, and give you time. What would you need? What do you need?
What may make sense?
Okay.
I understand. I think there really are opportunities. I understand the intermittentness of it. I think there really are opportunities. In the perfect world, we'd have a little bit of time between the department and the department being really responsive, with all due respect, not, you know, 2 years later we met, we offered this information.
Right.
That should have gone to arbitration at that point if we were really going to challenge it.
Right.
But at this, I think it makes sense for the CAO's office, the department, general services,
Yes.
and the union to figure
Get together.
and perhaps that is in light of letting this contract continue for instance, the first year of the term. It's not the happiest.
Well,
place
this is
that I
a
would say out
3-year
loud.
contract. It's a 1+2.
It is a.
This says
no.
it's a 3-year contract starting on September 1st with 2 1-year, okay.
As with standard contracts, there is a 30-day written notice termination clause.
Okay.
So-
This apparently already started in September 1st?
Yes. Because,
How did that happen? If it's started on September 1st and it's just now coming to this committee?
well, the department submitted its report to the mayor's office on
Yeah.
July 17th,
Uh-huh.
2008.
Okay.
And during the interim, the CAO analyst assigned to the convention center, who had been a part of the process with the union, was reassigned, and a new analyst came in, and a re-education process started.
Yes, you have a suggestion?
Well, in terms of the analysis, there's
Yeah.
continuity, and the staff person assigned to prepare the report actually was analyzing the data and meeting with GSD to determine, you know, to validate the costs, figures. Our office is certainly comfortable working with GSD and the
Okay,
convention center.
Why doesn't CAO facilitate discussions between the convention center, general services? I feel like we're in a bit of a bind for this first year. So why don't we do the first year, but would you facilitate these discussions
Yes, ma'am.
immediately?
We're more than happy to
Okay,
sit with our
and-
employee relations division and work with them
Yeah.
and bring everyone to the table.
Right.
And the union.
And the union, and the
And-
union.
yes,
That's
and-
what I meant
and
to
Julie.
say. I meant that.
Actually,
Particularly
the
you.
prior contract and the 7 positions that are now at the convention center were the
Right.
outgrowth of similar
Right.
discussions, so we're confident that we can all work together.
Okay, because there's just no way I'm going to feel good about this, having Julie Busher sit here and say, they're not happy with this. If they're not happy, I'm not happy. Okay, so we'll go forward with the first year. I hate having things that have already started, but let's do that. But let's facilitate these discussions, and I would facilitate them sooner than later.
Yeah,
I
we're
think-
more than
yeah.
happy to work
And
with all
everybody get ready
parties.
to analyze the data and come up with whether or not we think in all due process that these jobs could be filled by general services.
But
Okay.
Madam Chair, you are approving the contract as presented, which has a 3-year term.
Is that my only
Otherwise-
option?
Otherwise, you would have to disapprove it. And
Yeah. Can the contract be terminated at any point?
Yes, with 30-day written
Okay.
notice for convenience.
Okay. So then we are approving this 3-year contract that started on September 1st. But
with the direction to
with the
staff.
direction to begin immediately facilitating these discussions if we find that, particularly in light of everything that we're going to be doing, that it does make more sense to fill these jobs with our general services, then we can give a 30-day notice.
And at what point would you like, do you want us to report back within 60 days, 90 days?
Yeah, 60 days.
Okay.
I mean, I know it's the holidays, but I think this is pretty important. Yeah, okay, thank you. Thank you.
And
Okay,
finally, item 4.
I thought they said I could continue this. Okay, let's continue it. So, let's continue it. Okay. I mean, I gotta go. Okay, I do believe I have Chuck Tinnen, public comment. If you can make it brief, I'm late for city council.
No.
Okay, well.
I'm going to do this very quickly. Anyhow, let's hear there. But that sudden fear every time a bullet flies, it takes courage to reach out when others are silent. Herb wanted the first copy. I said, no, Janice gets that. This city's and its communities need to move forward now to help stop gang violence and encourage gang prevention, help the kids with more youth programs, sufficient funding for these intervention programs and youth programs that the city of Los Angeles does not have the money but needs. Support Janice Hahn's awesome project so she can come up with the funding to help her community, help other communities, and unite the hundreds of organizations in this city that talk about it but don't act because they don't have the money to do it. No one believes this yet, and like the song says, it starts with you and me to end violence, but I wanted to share, when I read in the LA Times, delays plague anti-gang plan, 105 million, and you know what? Every year they talk about it, all these things, no monies, and Jeff Carr says, gee, we need a formula to put it in the communities. Gee, only 8 of the 15 council districts have gang reduction programs, and Jeff Carr says it's the only way we can do it is not politics, but to do it. And you know what? I brought along with me today the first copy that is so awesome. It's not quite finished, but everybody's been working hard on it. And I was going to ask one thing from you that everybody said, and they did the music, and I gave it to you so you can learn it because what you did in the church was so beautiful. But they all agreed. They said, on that project, Janice Hahn needs to recite those words in the way she did in the church with the music. It would take a half hour in the studio to do that. It's a once in a
Oh,
lifetime.
you want me to be on the
Yes.
on the recording?
What they're going to do in the recording is have you, in your way that you did that,
my God. I don't
so
think I can ever
people
do that
get
again.
the, yes, You did it so
Same
beautiful
way.
in the church.
Yes, you can.
And,
Check it
and
out.
what they want is you to do with the music, then there's gonna be the full version, the
Okay.
radio version, and
Okay, thank you very much. Okay.
Madam Chair, just for the record, item 4 will be continued and
Yes.
item 5 was approved right, earlier.
Yes, very good. This was a hard meeting to keep track of. Okay, anybody else wishing to address this committee? Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned. I gotta run.